for a brand new show. Scooby Doo is here again, away we go.
Scooby Doo is running from a spooky ghost.
Shaggy isn't doing what he does the most. Hey, come on, get involved till the mystery is solved.
Hang around for Scooby Doo.
Hey, come on, get involved till the mystery is solved.
Hang around for Scooby Doo. That's my pal. Scooby Dooby Doo.
Hello, Scooby Doo fans! Welcome to my Season 1 Episode 8 review of the Scooby Doo Show. So last time I continued my playthrough of Scooby Doo Mystery Mayhem with the release of Part 2 of my Let's Play. I hope you guys enjoyed that, as well as the review of issue number 2 of the Scooby Doo Where Are You comic book series by Gold Key Comics. But of course today, I'll be covering Season 1 Episode 8 of the Scooby Doo Show, titled The No-Face Zombie Chase Case, which was released on October 30th, 1976. The short synopsis of the episode is, while eating dinner, Scooby witnesses a burglary. A valuable coin was stolen by a faceless zombie. As they follow the zombie to the Dilly Dally Dolly Company toy factory, they encounter a gorilla who might also be part of the robbery. So as per usual, I'll be watching Season 1 Episode 8 of the Scooby Doo Show on the Scooby Doo Dynamite Hour, the complete series DVD. This DVD has every episode of Season 1 of the Scooby Doo Show, as well as every episode of Dynamite, the Dog Wonder. So, if you want a physical media release copy of Season 1 of the Scooby Doo Show, this is your only available, physical media copy of that. But, if you like Dynamite as well, there's the added bonus of that. So, if you're a Dynamite fan as well as a Scooby Doo Show fan, then you'll love this DVD. Now, as far as this episode's reception is concerned, I believe most fans really like this episode. It's considered one of the better episodes of the series. It's very well regarded. It's not as highly regarded as Harem Scarum Sanitarium. I think Harem Scarum Sanitarium was a highly regarded episode of the franchise as a whole, as well as the series. I think this is a well-regarded episode in the series, but not in the franchise as a whole. But still a well-regarded episode, well-liked. One of the, a lot of people consider it one of the better episodes of the series. So with that in mind, do I agree with the majority on this? Do I agree with most of the Scooby-Doo community that this is a good episode of the series? Or do I maybe fall into the camp of thinking it's average, or maybe in a minority where I think it's not that great and consider it bad? Well, let's find out, shall we? So let's take a look at the episode to see whether I think it is a good or bad episode of the Scooby Doo Show. The episode begins with the gang having dinner in a sandwich shop. Next door, a strange zombie-like figure without a face that's in a pink cloak is robbing a coin store. Scooby witnesses this and tells the gang, who then inform the police when they arrive about what Scooby saw. However, the police lieutenant is skeptical about what the gang and Scooby saw and believes that they're just pranking them and tells them to go home and just watch some TV. The coin shop owner claims that the burglar stole the Golden Galleon, a supposedly cursed valuable coin. So Mystery gets to work and begins following the no-face zombie. They follow the zombie to the Dilly Dally Dolly Company, where they are greeted by a night watchman who scolds them and tells them to leave. So they decide to set up a plan to enter through an open window. Scooby is catapulted inside, then Fred and Shaggy are lifted with a crate on a forklift, but a car pulls up, forcing Velma and Daphne to hide in the crate. One of the men from the car drives the forklift into a garage, and Velma and Daphne become trapped in the crate. Fred, Scooby, and Shaggy hurry to the garage and manage to free them just before running into the two men who are the owners of the factory, Mr. Dilly and Mr. Dally. After hearing the gang's story, Mr. Dilly and Mr. Dally instruct them to stay in the office while they search for the no-face zombie. Mr. Dilly and the night watchman begin searching, and Mr. Dally is grabbed by the no-face zombie. Inside the office, Velma finds a magazine with 3 pages torn out, indicating that this is their first clue. Then the no-face zombie attacks Scooby and the gang, but they manage to swipe the Golden Galleon and flee from the zombie. When they make a run for it, they discover another villain, a giant gorilla who is now after the gang. Scooby and Shaggy run into the cafeteria and have a run-in with the popcorn machine. After the gang escapes the goons, they telephone the police. The police lieutenant tells them to wait there until he arrives. The gorilla and zombie make another appearance and chase the gang all around the factory. In the process, the zombie swipes the Golden Galleon. They are chased around some more, and while running, Scooby tumbles into a duplication machine and gets multiplied. After being found in a room full of multiple dogs, Scooby joins Shaggy outside to find a newsstand and get another copy of the magazine that Velma found, to see which pages were torn out. But the gorilla appears and chases them back to the factory. I really like the newsstand chase scene. We get to see Shaggy and Scooby find the answers to the one and only clue of the episode, and we get to see them do a not-so-great practice of hitchhiking, with Shaggy and Scooby acknowledging that it's a dangerous practice, especially in the 70s when it led to a lot of bad things happening. But they were in a dire situation, so they didn't have much of a choice, and it was just a fun little chase scene in the episode.
This is it, Scoob. Like, I'll pay the man and we'll split it. Faster, Scoob! Faster!
Faster? How?
I know it's the wrong thing to do, but let's try to catch a ride. Oh boy, like a ride. Thanks, mister. You can drop us off at the Dooley, yeah! Faster, Scoob! Faster!
Meanwhile, we cut back to Velma, Fred, and Daphne managing to steal the coin back from the zombie. The lieutenant, Scooby, and Shaggy arrive back at the factory and run into Fred and the girls. But the zombie appears and takes the golden galleon once again. After a short chase, they crash into the zombie and discover that it was a computerized robot. However, the gang and the lieutenant are not out of the woods yet, as the gorilla appears and swipes the golden galleon and tries to make a getaway, but Shaggy and Scooby act fast and trap him. I do enjoy the final chase scene as we get to see the Scooby gang work with a police lieutenant, and I think that's an awesome dynamic that hasn't been explored yet. And it's a nice bit of growth seeing the police lieutenant go from not believing them and just seeing them as kids that are wasting his time, to actually believing them and working with them and believing that they were good, good kids that, had good intentions at heart and were actually telling the truth and are very noble and brave kids. Nice little arc to see the police lieutenant go from not believing the Scooby gang to believing them and actually helping them into capturing the villain. I think that's an awesome little thing that we don't see in many Scooby-Doo episodes, and makes this final chase scene all the more great. And of course, we get to the tradition of Scooby and Shaggy capturing the villain at the end of the episode, which is always a plus.
Now do you believe us, Lieutenant?
I believe you've recovered the coins, kids. But a zombie? What was that?
That was a zombie.
I'll get him.
And we'll help you.
Look out!
What happened?
I'm afraid the zombie will never be the same, Lieutenant.
Wow! The no-face zombie was only a computerized robot.
Congratulations, kids. We have the coin again.
Correction. We have the coin again.
After him!
How do you stop this thing?
He's heading for the basement, Shaggy. Stop him!
Put it in reverse, Scooby!
Reverse?
Great work, guys!
That was quick thinking.
It was nothing.
The gorilla is unmasked as Mr. Dilly. He read about the coin article in the magazine and programmed the robot to steal the coin because it was worth $1 million. A pretty foolproof plan and a well-executed plan had it not been for the gang. not wanting to get his hands dirty and having a computerized robot designed as the no-face zombie, which fits with the legend that the coin shop owner, told us about in the beginning of the episode. So it was a really neat plan by Mr. Dilly. Very foolproof plan that honestly he probably wouldn't have been caught had it not been for the gang. However, when the gang was on to him, he donned the gorilla costume to scare them off and had Mr. Daly and the Night Watchman locked in the storeroom. Out of gratitude, Mr. Daly opens the factory cafeteria. And the episode ends with Shaggy and Scooby ordering some burgers, but Mr. Daly reveals that they're all gone as the duplicates of Scooby ate them all, which contradicts a previous scene where they distinguished Scooby with a Scooby snack. So they used food as a way to find the real Scooby out of the Scooby duplicates. But in this end gag, that contradicts that, since we see all the Scooby duplicates eating food. I know it's just a ending gag, and they're just using it to, as a funny little gag to end the episode. But it is still worth noting that it does contradict an earlier scene where they were able to distinguish the real Scooby out of the duplicates with food. I'm going to give Season 1, Episode 8 of the Scooby Doo Show 5 stars out of 5. So yeah, this was a fantastic episode. I really love this episode. To me, it was like a non-stop thrill ride. Like, I was constantly engaged throughout the whole story of the episode from beginning to end. This was a non-stop thrill ride for me. I was completely engaged with the story, with the gang, the elements surrounding the gang, the villains, everything. Like, everything worked for me. And while I don't think it's on the same level as Harem Scarum Sanitarium. I don't think it beats that out. It definitely rivals the Headless Horseman of Halloween episode for me as one of the best episodes of the series. I could see why this is a highly regarded episode. Everything was done really well. Some of the positive elements that I'm going to bring up could be debated as bad, and I may not argue with that, but I'm going to explain why I consider some elements that others may find, maybe not so great to be decent or passable in this episode. But before I get on to my long list of positives for the episode, I'll quickly run down the short list of negatives that I have for the episode that I think could have been tweaked to make it better, before we get on to the many positives that I have for the episode and why this episode is a fun, non-stop thrill ride type of episode. So starting with the negatives, my first one is that I think Daphne was pretty weak in this episode. I know I keep saying this, and I really hate having to keep saying this every time. But it really is true. Like, I'm not trying to dog on Daphne. It's just, I'm always looking for things that I can praise her on. It's just, for me, once again, she doesn't really do much in the story for me. She just doesn't do much for me to really consider her, great in this episode or even good. She has moments here and there with some members of the gang, but honestly, I could say the gang were definitely stronger more as a collective group in this episode than they were individually. I definitely can say that with I definitely would say that is the case with this episode. That this is a better episode group and team wise than it is individual wise. But the reason the rest of the gang work is because they at least fulfill their bare minimum roles and they contribute something to the story. Whereas Daphne, while she works fine with the other members of the gang, individually, she does not have enough moments for me to consider her good individually. She doesn't fulfill some kind of base role for me. So, unfortunately, Daphne was yet again weak in this episode. Hopefully, this issue will be resolved soon. She had her moments here and there, like I always say, but it wasn't enough for me to consider her good as an individual character in this episode. And my final negative for the episode is that I think outside of costume, Mr. Dilly was very uninteresting. Not behind the scenes, as I'll get on to a bit later, with his planning, but for the moments we got with him, which was like maybe 2 or 3 scenes before he dressed in the gorilla costume, And, before he even showed up to the factory, the few scenes that we see the gang interact with him, we don't get really much of his character. Now, granted, when he is revealed as the villain, we do get a lot of great details on how he's a pretty smart guy for the way he planned to execute his motive. But I think that's more of a positive when it comes to the motive rather than him as an individual character. Like, he did a smart job, constructing a plan to execute his motive. But as a character himself, for the few moments we see with him, we don't get much about him. We just know that he's one of the two owners of the factory, of this company, this toy factory company, this toy company. But we don't know what the state is of it. We don't know if he's just a greedy man. We don't know if the toy factory is maybe going out of business. Maybe it's like the sales are low. Maybe, he's on hard times. We don't know. I don't know the circumstances of it, so I can't really say if he has any sort of layers to him outside of costume. So for me, there's not really much to him, and he just doesn't really present much in the way, character-wise. But motive-wise, yeah, he creates a cool plan that is very smart and well constructed, but as an individual character, he just didn't really stand out for me. But that's all I got for negatives, so let's get on to the mini list of positives and what I like about the episode. So starting with the positives, my first one is that I think Fred was a good leader in this episode. I think he fulfilled his base role well. I think he did a good job, fulfilling his base role well and telling, certain members of the gang where to go and saying, like, okay, Daphne and Velma, you stay with me. We'll stay in the toy factory. We will keep the Golden Galleon away from the No-Face Zombie, and we will give it to the lieutenant and prove to him that we are not lying. And Shaggy and Scooby, you go get the copy of the magazine so we can figure out if this is an important clue to what's going on or if it's nothing. Right? So he gives Shaggy and Scooby something to do, and then he has Daphne and Velma help him, with their objective. So he gives the gang two separate objectives, one for his group and one for Shaggy and Scooby's group. So that, to me, was a good showcase of his leadership. But yeah, besides that, he didn't really do much, but he didn't really set up a trap or anything. But this was a good display of his leadership skills, saying, okay, Daphne and Velma, you'll come with me and we'll fulfill this objective. Shaggy and Scooby, you will go and fulfill this objective. That's good leadership quality, and I like that they showcased that with Fred in this episode. Then, of course, we have Velma. Now, Velma, I think, fulfilled her base role quite well. She found the one and only clue of the episode, which was the magazine with the torn pages out of it. And this turned out to be a vital clue and was, helped them, figure out what the motive of the villain was. Had she not found that, they would have not known what Mr. Dilly was after in this episode. But because she found that, it pointed towards the motive, which was good. And it was vital to solving the mystery. And I think Velma and Shaggy kind of had a joint effort on, helping to solve the mystery with that one clue. Because Velma found it, but Shaggy got the copy to help verify that this was an important clue and not some throwaway thing that, didn't matter. But yeah, Velma fulfilled her base role, and she also came up with the idea, when her and Daphne were trying to steal the Golden Galleon back, of using the doll gimmick to, pretend like they're dolls and steal the Golden Galleon from the No-Face Zombie. So Velma did, do a good job in this episode. She had a few moments, but I think the most important thing was that she found the one and only clue of the episode that was vital to solving the mystery and was able to piece together what the motive of the villain was. Then we have Shaggy and Scooby, of course. So starting with Shaggy almost was not that great in this episode. But the reason I gave him a pass and actually thought he was good was because he helped get a copy of the magazine that was important to solving the mystery. He may not have been the one to, piece it together like Velma did, but he did help Velma out tremendously by verifying to her that this was an important clue, that did relate to the mystery and wasn't something that was a throwaway and was like a nothing, type of clue. And he also helped Scooby at the end capture the villain, even if it was inadvertently. Now, Scooby actually did a fantastic job in this episode, and I think besides Fred, Scooby was definitely the strongest in this episode. He helped get the Golden Galleon back, I think at least, once or twice in this episode. The first time was really funny in the office. He helped get it. That was good. And he helped capture the villain at the end of the episode, like I said, even though it was inadvertently. And he was just really funny in this episode. Like, I gotta admit, Scooby was really funny in this episode. And I think it sucks that Scooby was very comedic and fun in this episode, but not Shaggy. Like, Shaggy had his moments here and there, but he was certainly not as comedic as he should have been. Whereas Scooby was fucking funny in this episode. I don't know why. They just, they had the comedy writing for Scooby was great, but they didn't give much for Shaggy in this episode, which I think it was a shame. Regardless, though, Shaggy was still good. He still helped solve the mystery in a way, and he did help Scooby capture the villain. This definitely isn't the strongest episode for Shaggy, but for what it's worth, he did help Scooby out tremendously, and the rest of the gang out tremendously. So that's why I give him a pass, because I think they still did pretty well together. But Shaggy wasn't nearly going to be a weak element like Daphne, but thankfully he had enough moments for him enough moments to save him from that, for me to consider him good in this episode. Another thing too that I like to point out that's also a positive is the gang as a group. Normally I don't talk about it because it normally doesn't matter. But in this case, in certain episodes, sometimes the gang are more effective as a collective group rather than individually. I think I said that in the episode 2 review of season 1 of the Scooby Doo Show. The Fiesta host is an Aztec ghost. I think that episode I said they were strong as a group, but not individually. And I think it's the same here, although much better executed. The gang were really great as a collective group and were really worked well together. Like I said, I like that 2 separate groups were divided for the gang to do 2 different objectives. Fred, Daphne, and Velma trying to help keep the Golden Galleon away from the zombie until the lieutenant arrived, and Shaggy and Scooby going to the newsstand to get a copy of the magazine to help solve the mystery and to see if this clue is of vital importance to the mystery or if it's nothing and it doesn't matter. That, to me, is a really good showcase of the gang's teamwork and was the best representation, probably so far, of the gang working collectively together. Because normally when they split off, it's just a search for clues. They're not really, they're given the same objective. This time, I think it's interesting that they're given 2 different objectives, where Fred, Daphne, and Velma do one objective and Shaggy and Scooby do a different objective. I think that's really cool and something that hadn't been done before yet, at least not up to this point in the franchise. So I really like that idea, and this was a good showcase of the gang as a collective group and as a team working well together by doing 2 different objectives to help solve the mystery. And one more thing that I like to discuss when it comes to the gang is I like that the gang got to work together with a police lieutenant in this episode and try to get him to believe their story about the no-face zombie. Normally, police are regulated to either being at the end to arrest the villain or, they're there to be, or in later series, they're there to be resentful towards the gang and being hateful because they don't like that the gang are upstaging them and doing their job for them. In this case, the police lieutenant isn't hateful towards the gang and doesn't come until the end. He's there from the beginning, and he has this little arc of seeing the gang as just kids that are wasting his time to actually, brave and noble and helpful kids that actually helped him catch a criminal. So I think that's really interesting, and having a police lieutenant as a bit of a character, like a supporting character, is an interesting idea and a really neat one, and one that isn't hateful or resentful towards the gang, like in some later series, and jealous of them. or, you know, just comes at the end. He actually has screen time in this episode and actually helps them at the end to capture the villain, to catch the criminal. And he has this little arc from, you know, seeing the gang as teenagers that are wasting his time to brave and noble teenagers that were willing to help him catch criminal. And I think that was a neat little arc for the police lieutenant to have. Maybe others may not see it that way, but I certainly saw that in this episode. And it was a unique experience for the gang to interact with a police lieutenant this way, as we hadn't seen this before in the franchise up to this point. And I think it helped distinguish this episode a little bit by having the gang team up with the police lieutenant. Now, it wasn't for the majority of the episode, but it was for a good portion of it. And it was just a neat dynamic that hadn't been explored yet. And I think it was a really cool idea to, you know, explore that in this episode and help make it stand out. So I loved it. Next up, we have the villains of the episode. So the two villains of the episode were, of course, the No-Face Zombie and the Gorilla. Now, before I get on to the Gorilla and how I'm going to explain why I think he's actually a positive, I'll go into the No-Face Zombie first, since he's the main villain for a lot of the episode. The No-Face Zombie was a good villain. A really good villain. Now, I wouldn't necessarily call him a scary villain. He does have creepy moments here and there. I think the creepiest moment is when he's chasing after the gang after the Golden Galleon was stolen from him from the first time from Scooby, and when the gang, you know, run out of the office to leave with the Golden Galleon and go down the elevator, seeing the zombie, you know, speed walk with his little limp leg was creepy as shit. That was creepy. But for the majority of the episode, I actually found the No-Face Zombie to be much more entertaining. He had a lot of personality for a computerized robot. You know, for a computerized robot, Mr. Dilly certainly gave the zombie some personality, as the zombie looked fucking pissed every time the gang would take the Golden Galleon away from him, and it was hilarious. It was just funny. Like, the zombie should not have personality because it's a robot, but somehow, some way, it actually has a bit of personality, and maybe that's a good thing because, you know, it's making you believe that this is an actual human being in a costume. But when you find out it's a computerized robot at the end, it's like, you know, for a robot, Mr. Dilly programmed quite a you know, robot that had a lot of personality to it, you know. So I found the No-Face Zombie much more entertaining than scary, mainly because, like, of just his personality and mannerisms. Like, he had creepy moments, like his limp leg was definitely creepy as shit whenever he would walk like that. The pink cloak definitely does diminish the scariness a little bit. It does make him stand out, but I definitely think it was a weird choice to give this No-Face Zombie a pink cloak. And I'm not gonna lie, his face kind of looks like butt cheeks. And I mean that literally. Like, I'm not talking about, like, his design is crap or anything. I'm not meaning that metaphorically. I mean his face actually looks like two butt cheeks. And there's, like, a crack in the middle. Like, it doesn't look like an actual faceless zombie. It doesn't hurt it overall. It just means that the zombie is more entertaining to me than he is scary. He has scary elements to him and has moments, but he's not particularly scary, mainly for, you know, the way his face is designed, because it looks like he has a literal butt for a face. And the pink cloak is a little bit of an odd choice. I definitely think maybe a different color probably would have been better suited. It's just a weird color to choose for a cloak, of all things, for a zombie. But I love the No-Face Zombie. He had his moments of creepiness, but he was so fun and entertaining. He had a lot of personality to him. And despite the weird little quirks to his design, I still think it endears me to him, and it still is good regardless. Even if these design choices are a little bit odd to me, I still enjoy them. But now here comes the portion where I try to explain to you guys why I actually think the gorilla costume is a positive. Look, I don't disagree with anybody that thinks this costume is ass, because it is. It is the shittiest costume ever. Normally, like any other person in the Scooby-Doo community, I hate when villains dress up as, animals. Because they're lame. They're cheap and lame, especially a gorilla. Like, they're not scary. They're very lazy. And, it's just not, and basically those two factors, it's lazy and it's not scary. However, in the context of this episode, it actually works. Let me explain. The reason that the gorilla works for me in this episode is because of what Mr. Dilly's plan was. Mr. Dilly had no intention to dress up in a costume in this episode. He was going to have the No-Face Zombie do everything. The No-Face Zombie was going to be the main villain. He was supposed to be the only villain of the episode. The reason Mr. Dilly had to dress up is because he knew he needed to scare the gang away, and the gang were getting, suspicious of him and his plans. He needed to get them away and out of the building, and the zombie clearly, and having two villains chase him at the same time could help increase his efforts. So he had no intentions of dressing up in this gorilla costume, but at the last minute had to change his plans, and thus he just picked whatever was available, and that's the reason for the lame design. So if he had ample time to plan this, and he had always planned to dress up as a gorilla, then I would absolutely hate this. No doubt about that. The reason, like I said, though, that it works is because it works in the context of the episode. Mr. Dilly had no intention of wearing a costume. He was going to have the No-Face Zombie do everything on its own. He only did it because the gang were interfering and he had to make last-minute changes, and this was probably the best available costume that he could find in his factory. Now, granted, that doesn't make it a good design, and I don't think the gorilla is a good costume at all. I still stand by that it's one of the shittiest costumes in the series. It's a lame design, but it's passable because it works in the context of the episode. So sometimes a shitty design can actually work in the context of the episode if it makes sense. In other episodes, it doesn't make sense, but in this case, it does make sense for why he's lazy and shitty with his costume choice, because it's a last-minute thing, and he had no intention of dressing up. And I'm not gonna lie, there are a couple funny scenes with the gorilla, but yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna deny that the gorilla is a lame costume and is one of the stupidest villains ever. I don't disagree with that. But like I said, the reason it's passable for me is because it works in the context of the episode. It's a shitty costume and a shitty design. I will not argue that. It is shitty to every degree. Terrible costume, terrible design, nothing scary about it, nothing entertaining about it. But because of how it's contextualized in the episode, I give it a pass and it works. So, yeah, that's why I think the gorilla is a positive for me, because it fits well into the context of the episode. I thought the motive of the episode was good. So, Mr. Dilly wanted to steal a valuable coin, which was the Golden Galleon, so that he could sell it to the Swahili for $1 million. Now, on the surface, this is just a plain robbery motive. Normally, there would be nothing special about it. The reason it works is because of the way Mr. Dilly constructed this plan. Like I said, this was a well-constructed plan. He built a computerized robot that was designed as a zombie, not only to steal the coin, but if anybody were to see it, what policeman is gonna believe somebody saying, "Oh, a zombie stole a coin"? Nobody's going to believe that. Nobody's going to believe that a zombie with no face who's limping around would ever steal a coin. Especially not the police. So this was an interesting motive, because then the computerized robot, which was, designed as a zombie, could be masked as, could be fit into the legend of the coin that the coin shop owner talked about, but it could also be a disguise, for bystanders, because what policeman is going to believe a bystander that sees, says, "Oh, I saw this no-face zombie that limp into the store and steal this coin." What policeman's going to believe that? And then, of course, the zombie would have come back to the factory, given Mr. Dilly, the coin, and then Mr. Dilly could sell it to the Swahili, and no one would be the wiser and think that he was a part of that scheme, because nobody saw him rob it, because he had his robot do it, which was a really neat plan. It was well constructed, it was smart, it gave this motive a lot of layers to it, and made it more than just a simple money motive that had robbery. It had layers to it. It was a well-constructed plan, and honestly, had the gang not foiled it, he would have gotten away with it, for sure. Like, this was a foolproof plan. This was a good plan by a villain. He made an excellent plan. He would have easily gotten away with it if it weren't for the gang. Had the gang not found out about, his involvement in it, he would have gotten away with it. He would have gotten the $1 million with no one being the wiser. So really good motive. I love Mr. Dilly's plan and how it's constructed. It gave this motive a lot of layers to it and made it more interesting than it normally would be, because we've had robbery motives up to this point, and if it wasn't for this plan and how well constructed it is, I probably would have considered this motive pretty generic and bare bones. But thanks to the layers to it, it elevated it. There were a good number of suspects in this episode. You had 3 suspects in the episode. You had Mr. Dilly, Mr. Dally, and you had the Night Watchman, who wasn't really named. But they were all equally suspicious, because the Night Watchman had the build of the gorilla, and Mr. Dilly and Mr. Dally also had the build of the zombie. And you don't even suspect that the zombie could be a robot. You assume that it's a human under the mask. So it makes it all, it makes it even better when you find out that one of them was just a robot, and the other of them was only one person under the mask. So there were a good number of suspects. They fit the build for for both villains, and they were very suspicious in the way they acted towards the gang. Even though the gang are telling them that a zombie is in their building. Although if somebody were to tell you that, you probably wouldn't believe them. Honestly, the fact that Mr. Dilly, Mr. Dally, and the Night Watchman humor the gang and decide to search the building, I guess because they figure, there must be something in the building if these kids are willing to break in for it and tell us that there's something in here. I found the mystery of the episode to be quite engaging, to be quite honest. So, the mystery of the episode is there was a lot of questions in this episode. The first one is that who was this no-face zombie? Who was this person? Is it who is this no-face zombie walking around? Was it even a person that died and came back to life? Or is it just a servant for a higher power, like that in the afterlife? We have the legend, the backstory for him that's told by the coin shop owner, but it's very vague and it doesn't really give much description. It just says that this guy put a curse on the coin. But it doesn't say why he put a curse on the coin. Like, it doesn't really go much into detail about it. It's pretty vague, the backstory for the no-face zombie. So there's a lot of intrigue on who this no-face zombie is, before he was a zombie. And then there's also the fact of, why is this no-face zombie breaking into the shop and stealing this coin? What's so special about this specific coin? And what does he want to do with the coin? Is it some kind of magical coin? Is there some other type of purpose for it? Why is this no-face zombie going into this coin shop, breaking in and stealing this particular coin out of all the coins in there? And what does he plan to do with it? What's the purpose of stealing the coin? You also want to know what the connection is between the no-face zombie and the toy factory. Is this just a last-minute thing where the zombie just wanted to elude the gang, so he went to the closest place he can to hide? Or is this his base of operations, and if so, what's going on there? And is he connected to the gorilla as well? Like, are the gorilla and the no-face zombie connected? Are they separate villains entirely? You know, what's going on here? Like, what's going on in this toy factory? Why is there a gorilla and a no-face zombie in the same building? You know, so a lot of questions that we get good answers to. Plenty of mystery and intrigue in this episode. I really enjoyed the mystery. It was constantly engaging and, you know, kept me on the edge of my seat, wondering what answers we were going to get and where we were going to go from here. You know, each scene building upon the next. I thought the clues of the episode were good. So we had one clue in the episode, which was the torn 3 pages of the magazine. Now, normally when there's one clue, I would normally say that's a bad thing. But in this case, it's actually good, because it gives Shaggy and Scooby a second objective to go, you know, investigate this clue and see if it's legitimate or if it's not important. But it also helps explain the motive of the villain and what he was after and what he was hoping to achieve. So despite there only being one clue, it was very vital to the mystery, and it gave Shaggy and Scooby a second different objective to go after in the episode, while Fred and Daphne and Velma had their own objective of keeping the Golden Galleon safe from the no-face zombies so they could give it to the lieutenant when he got there. I thought the atmosphere of the episode was really great. It was filled with tension and suspense. I was constantly on the edge of my seat wondering what was going to happen next. And that's a good testament to the story of the episode, you know, and the elements surrounding it, that I was constantly engaged. I was constantly wondering what was going to happen next in the story and where the story was going to take us. It wasn't creepy or eerie. But it was filled with tension and suspense, not because of the gang's safety being threatened, or anything in the setting, or anything the villains did. But the atmosphere was good because because it had me engaged throughout the episode. You know, I wanted to know where the story was going to take us, and I was on the edge of my seat wondering what was going to happen next. So to me, that's sort of an atmosphere, as it kept me engaged and didn't lose my attention for 1 second, which is what I want atmosphere to do. If it's not going to provide, you know, any sort of thing where it's threatening the gang's safety, or, you know, it's not creepy or eerie, then I at least want it to keep me on the edge of my seat, wondering where the story is going to take us next. So in that sense, the atmosphere was good. Not a creepy and eerie atmosphere, but a tension and suspenseful-filled atmosphere because of where the story could take us and the possibilities of maybe the no-face zombie and the gorilla may do some dire things to the gang in order to stop them from whatever they're doing. You know, it's basically the fear of what could happen next and keep me on the edge of my seat, where maybe things could change for, you know, and things could get, amp up. Now, thankfully, that didn't happen. For, you know, the gang's safety wasn't threatened too much, but the element of that kept me on the edge of my seat, as I didn't know where the story was going to go next and how far the villains were going to take their actions. And my final positive is that I thought the setting of the episode was good. Not the best setting in the episode. The setting of the episode was the toy factory. A factory setting isn't anything new. We've had this before. I think the toy factory works because it has some interesting rooms to it, so it helps distinguish it a little bit. It's not the best setting in the world, and it's not very Scooby-esque. It's not creepy or eerie. But it does have interesting rooms to it, and it serves the story well. So overall, despite it not being a very Scooby-esque setting, and despite it being a reuse of a previous setting that we had in the Cass Elliot episode, it was a different kind of factory, and it had enough distinguishing features to it that I was able to give it a pass. Again, not the best setting in the world when it comes to Scooby-Doo, but a serviceable one that fit the episode well and served the story of the episode well. Overall, guys, I would recommend this episode to fans and newcomers of the show. It's not perfect. It's not, on the level of Harem Scarum Sanitarium, But it is a very fun and enjoyable episode, and is very much a non-stop thrill ride. It is very engaging, very fun, and enjoyable, and a very rewatchable episode. And it's definitely one of the best episodes of the series so far. Not the best, though. It definitely does not top Harem Scarum Sanitarium, but it does compete with Headless Horseman of Halloween, and definitely gives that a run for its money. But even if it weren't to beat that, it would still be probably my third favorite so far. It is definitely a really good episode, a very fun and engaging episode, and definitely one that's easily rewatchable, and that I can enjoy on many repeat watchings. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the review. Please give a like if you did. Comment down below your thoughts on the episode. Do you like this episode? Are you like me? Do you consider it one of the better episodes of the series and one of the best ones of the series so far? Do you hate this episode? I'd be interested in that as well. Like, is this not one of your favorite episodes? Are you in the minority? Do you think it's not that great? I'd be interested in that, to hear that as well. Or are you somewhere in the middle where you just think it's decent, it's okay, it's average, but it's not good or bad? I'm curious for your thoughts, so let me know. And subscribe for more Scooby-Doo content like this, or if you're just interested in any of my other content, I'll have plenty more Scooby-Doo content on the way, as this is a Scooby-Doo focused channel, both gaming-wise, review-wise, for, TV show episodes, and book reviews, and movie reviews will also come to the channel as well. So, plenty of Scooby-Doo content on the way to fill your Scooby appetite, and we will tackle everything on this channel. My goal is to tackle all things Scooby-Doo and give every piece of Scooby-Doo media the attention it deserves. So if you want to know my thoughts on certain pieces of Scooby-Doo media and also want to engage with me on certain pieces of Scooby-Doo media, then come join the channel and experience some amazing Scooby-Doo content. In my next video, I will continue my reviews of the Scooby Doo Show with a review of Season 1, Episode 9 of the Scooby Doo Show, titled Mamba Wamba and the Voodoo Hoodoo, a episode that I am not particularly fond of, if I remember correctly. I haven't gone back to this episode in a little while, so that doesn't bode well for me, and it's not a very highly regarded episode by Scooby Doo fans. So I'm expecting it to be not that great. Maybe it'll surprise me, but I definitely have low expectations going into it. I haven't seen this episode in a little while, and it may not be one of the better episodes of the series. So we'll see if it impresses me. We'll see if, it's good at all. Maybe an underrated gem. But, I'm definitely tempering my expectations for it. So if you want to know my thoughts on Mamba Wamba and the Voodoo Hoodoo, Season 1, Episode 9 of the Scooby Doo Show, then come join me next time. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching this video, and as always, peace out.
We got it all together for a brand new show. Scooby-Doo is here again, away we go.
Scooby-Doo is running from a spooky ghost.
Shaggy isn't doing what he does